Welcome to the Widowed Mom Podcast, episode 274, Grief Power Grabs.
Welcome to the Widowed Mom Podcast, the only podcast that offers a proven process to help you work through your grief, to grow, evolve, and create a future you can truly look forward to. Here's your host, Master Certified Life Coach, grief expert, widow, and mom, Krista St-Germain.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am probably on my way home from Argentina today, if you were listening to this on the day it comes out. I mentioned it last week, but my daughter is going to be spending the semester in Argentina with a really awesome opportunity. And so I went down there and should be, hopefully, cross your fingers that flights go smoothly, on my way back today as this episode releases. I will also say, if you know me, you know that I love decorating for fall. I have been so excited to come back from Argentina because I have an agreement with my partner that after Labor Day, the decorations are coming out. Halloween and fall. Well, I'll start with fall. Fall decorations are coming out. I'll wait until probably late September before I get Halloween out, but I'm excited. I'm excited for fall. So holding off through the end of August is like a major accomplishment because usually my daughter and I are like decorating mid-fall. Here we are. All right. I also wanted to tell you that Grief Essentials is open for enrollment. We start September 17th. There is an early bird pricing that you can take advantage of. I don't know at what point I will call that off, but right now it's still happening. So coachingwithkrista.com/grief essentials. Grief Essentials is for you if you are feeling like you are in early grief, if grief is intense, it's a little overwhelming, and you want tools that make it easier. You want a community that makes it easier. Grief Essentials is an 8-week program. This is the second time we've done it. I love doing it the first time. I learned so much. We're going to make it even better the second time. And it's for those who are not ready for Mom Goes On. You're not in the grief plateau yet. You are really still experiencing the intensity of an acute grief experience, and you want to make it easier. I really do believe that with the right tools, the right community, early grief gets easier. It can be easier, and that's what Grief Essentials is for. Then later, if you're feeling stuck in the grief plateau and you're ready for support with that, then Mom Goes On would be good for you. So, of course, Mom Goes On, we start a new group every month. You're welcome to apply for that at coachingwithkrista.com. You can click on the Work With Me page. But Grief Essentials is a short-term, not always available program. Will start September 17th. Grief Essentials can be found at coachingwithkrista.com/grief essentials. And if you think you're interested, go check it out. All right. I'm looking forward to doing it again. It was a really awesome group the last time and a nice, intimate, cozy experience, which I enjoyed. So there you go. All right. Let's talk about grief power grabs. Actually, on last week's episode, we talked about helpful thoughts in grief. And I told you that one of the reasons it can be useful to choose thoughts on purpose in grief, right? Choose helpful thoughts is because it's a way of regaining a sense of power when you feel like you have no power at all, right? And I warned that I don't always think that's a good idea. And so in today's episode, we're going to parse that out a bit. So I want to talk about how and why really we find ourselves making grief power grabs. I'll share a little bit about what that looked like for me. And then I want to give you some ideas of what it might look like for you, not because it's bad, right? But because when our awareness is high around something, we can see what it's creating in our lives, and then we can choose whether it's helpful for us, right? And that's what I want for you, because what I see is that so often we're just in it and we have a very low awareness of what's happening. And therefore, we don't even have the chance to pull back and ask ourselves, is this working for me? Is this getting me what I want? And that's what I want to talk about today so that you can do that. Okay. So what do I mean? Grief power grab. It can just feel like everything is out of control when your person dies, right? And I know for me, of course, different circumstances for different people. But when Hugo died, it was following an accident, right? A drunk driver hit us, and it only took, less than a day between the accident and the time he died. So it really did feel like, in a matter of hours, that the rug had been ripped right out from underneath me. And it really felt like going from my best days are ahead of me to my life is over, I'll never be truly happy again, in an instant. Now, I know that's not the same experience everyone has, for sure. Also, though, I do think that sense of powerlessness is a shared experience, no matter how your person died, no matter how long it took for them to die. There can be such a powerlessness in watching someone you care about, watching them deteriorate over time. Such a sense of powerlessness about that. Watching your kids grieve and be sad, even if they're adult kids. Many of my clients have adult grown children, some of them grandchildren. It doesn't matter. Watching other people in pain can have us feeling powerless. And so I know for me, I didn't recognize it until well after it was over. But one of the ways that I tried to prove to myself, to kind of create this little power grab in my grief, I tried to prove to myself that I was more powerful, was that I got hyper focused on my weight and on exercise and on nutrition. I was kind of like coming at the world with an "I'll show you" energy of, I'm going to prove to myself that I'm going to be okay. I'm going to prove to the world that I'm going to be okay. And one of the ways that I tried to grab for power was to really hyper focus on what I ate and how I moved my body and changing my weight. And there's so many different ways that it shows up. So for sure, it might not be that for you, but as I was going through it, I could not see until much later, actually, that a huge part of the reason I was doing that was because I was trying to make myself feel powerful. And it makes so much sense, right? It makes so much sense. So I really want to normalize that when we are feeling powerless, we don't particularly love it. And it makes sense that we would want to avoid it. And it makes sense that in order to avoid it, we would turn to trying to control. So it's not good. It's not bad. Makes sense. We just want to bring some awareness to it. So here's some ways that it might look in your life. It could look like obsessive organization, like reorganizing everything, cleaning obsessively, decluttering, right? That could be a way that we do a little power grab and try to manage those feelings of internal chaos. It might look like an obsession or an overmanagement of household finances. So maybe you're taking just meticulous control over your budgeting and over your expenses to make yourself feel powerful and to give you a sense of security. Maybe you are noticing that you are super strict with your routines. So you have very rigid daily routines, very rigid weekly routines. And it's kind of like following those routines gives you this idea that life is predictable and you're in control. It might be around decision making. You might notice yourself insisting that you be the one that makes all the major decisions by yourself without getting anybody else's input. And I'm not saying you need to get anybody else's input, by the way. You don't need to check with anybody. But if you notice that you're doing it as a way of trying to not feel out of control or powerless, this might be why. You might notice an overprotectiveness around your children, where you're wanting to control more so than you used to different things, aspects of their lives. So maybe it's their social interactions, it's their educational choices, or you're just feeling overprotective as a way to avoid feeling powerless, as a way to feel powerful or more in control. It could be around legal affairs, estate affairs. So maybe you are just, really taking control of whatever your spouse's estate or legal matters were beyond what might be required of you. Okay. Sometimes it shows up as isolation tactics, restricting social engagements, where we're choosing to isolate ourselves or control social interactions so that we feel more powerful or less powerless. We manage that emotional intensity of dealing with others. Again, I'm not saying that any of these things are good or bad. We're not labeling them. I'm just bringing them to your attention so that you can notice what is fueling you to do these things. And then you can decide if the return is what you want. Sometimes people get very controlling as it relates to memorials or remembrances, right? Dictating the how and the when and the what and how we remember them, how we honor them as a way to feel more powerful and less powerless. Sometimes we do it by throwing ourselves into our work or into projects, and not just distracting with work or projects, but controlling them, right? Holding things tightly so that we can feel more powerful. And you might find yourself overscheduling, right? Filling up the calendar so that you avoid downtime, because sometimes that's when the hardest thoughts and feelings show themselves, is in the downtime. So those are some of the ways that it might show up. Now, again, not good, not bad. We're not trying to assign some sort of moral value here. We just want to look at, why am I doing these things to the extent that I'm doing them? What is it creating for me when I do them this way? Am I getting a return that I want? Is this pattern moving me toward what I want or away from what I want? So that you get to be the one who chooses. That's really important. So you might ask yourself, what's driving this? If you recognized any of these patterns, or maybe there's one I didn't mention that you can identify in your own life, what might be driving that desire for control? Are you afraid that you're going to lose something else in the future and that you won't be able to handle it? Are you like me, where you were feeling a need to prove to yourself and kind of to prove to the world that you can handle something? Is there something about the feeling of powerlessness that is just really undesirable for you and you're trying to get away from it and make yourself not feel it? It's not so much about one particular thing motivating you. It's about you getting curious about your motivations. It's about you developing compassion and understanding and being kind and generous with yourself. If you notice that this is what's happening. And then from that place, then we can think about powerlessness on purpose. And we can remind ourselves that what we think we're powerless around isn't always true. And sometimes we really are powerless, right? We can, from that place, we can notice where we can control things and where we can't, where we can influence things and where we can't, right? We don't get to choose the past, that's over, but we do get to decide how we want to think about it. We do get to decide to some extent what we want to create in the future. And this is a step in that direction. Also, powerlessness, I like to remind myself and my clients, powerlessness is just an emotion like all the others. It's an emotion that we can allow to pass through us. It doesn't have any sort of more awful quality to it, really, than other emotions. Even though if you stacked up all of the emotions and lined them up in order of desirability, you would typically find that powerless seems to be one of the emotions humans prefer the least. It is just still an emotion, and it is temporary. It will pass through, doesn't last forever. So we can handle it. We don't need to make ourselves feel powerful so that we can not feel powerless, if we can decide to make friends with the feeling of powerlessness as it passes through, or at least if we can decide to let it pass through instead of trying to resist it or avoid it all the time. And I think there's actually a bit of peace that we can create for ourselves when we acknowledge that to some extent, we really are powerless. And we always have been. Sometimes it's the death of our person and some undesired circumstances that have to happen before we realize that we're actually not as powerful as we thought we were, or maybe as we want to be. And if you think about how much pressure we can create for ourselves when we think we have to control all the things, it can actually be a bit of a relief to let go and recognize that there are some things we don't get to control. And really, even though we thought we knew how life was going to go, we're really not any more uncertain now than we were then. It's just that then we thought we were more certain, right? We thought we knew how things were going to go. But I think they were never going to go that way. And we were always uncertain about how they were going to go. We were just living in an illusion of certainty. We were just living in an illusion of a powerfulness that didn't actually exist. And I think that there's peace in acknowledging that. So, if you're noticing power grabs in your grief that are creating results that you don't want, if the return you're getting on those efforts is not actually what you want, then we can notice that desire to control or that desire to avoid feeling powerless, and we can soften. We can soften into what can be a very powerful next level of growth for many of us. It's the invitation that most of us don't really want. But when we do create that softening and that opening and that recognition of where we are powerful and where we are powerless and make peace with that, I think the world gets easier. So, in conclusion, power grabs in grief aren't good or bad. They're not right or wrong. Please don't hear me telling you that you should be judging yourself or avoiding that. It's not what I'm saying. What I want you to do is question, what is the reason that I might be trying to control in some of these areas? Do I like the reasons that I'm doing that? Is it giving me the return that I want? Is it moving me toward what I want in my life, or is it holding me back from what I want in my life? And then you can have your own back and be your own champion and be kind and gracious with yourself. And if you don't like the pattern, you can change it. And that might look like getting more comfortable with powerlessness. That might look like getting better at feelings, which is one of my favorite things to help people with. That might look like creating peace and acknowledging that to some extent, we've always been uncertain about what's in front of us. And we've always been powerless to control certain aspects of our human experience. That is what it's like to be human. So I hope this helps you. Remember, I love you. You've got this. Take good care, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. If you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and want to create a future you can truly get excited about even after the loss of your spouse, I invite you to join my Mom Goes On coaching program. It's small group coaching just for widowed moms like you, where I'll help you figure out what's holding you back and give you the tools and support you need so you can move forward with confidence. Please don't settle for a new normal that's less than what you deserve. Go to coachingwithkrista.com and click Work With Me for details and next steps. I can't wait to meet you.